This happened when I was 23 years old in the summer of 2013. I was newly single after the girl I had been dating had moved over 2,000 miles from my city to another state, and I was devastated to say the least. We had a very strong and healthy relationship together for a good 3 years and rarely had any fights or arguments. Ever since she had moved, I sort of became an introvert for a while. I spent less time around friends, I didn't go anywhere, and I didn't even talk to my family in some cases. After a few months of going through a cycle of constant depression, I decided that I needed to move on and find someone new. I'd like to note that I'm a very socially awkward person, especially around girls, and the only girls who I knew in person were already dating. One of my longtime friends recommended that I do online dating with a wildly new popular app that everyone was talking about. I don't recall the name of the app, but I took my friend's advice. I signed up for the app, created my profile and bio, and chose a few photos that I thought looked good. I am not the most attractive looking guy, but I was still hopeful that I'd get a few matches. I messaged a few local women in my area, and I eventually ended up matching with a very cute girl who wasn't too older than me named Sophia. She was in her mid-20s and only had 3 photos of herself. One was a picture of her and what I assumed to be her friend. The other was at a beach, and the other one appeared to be taken at a college frat party. Like I said, with me being a very socially awkward kind of guy, I thought this girl was way out of my league as she seemed very social. However, I was just happy to get a match, so I hit her up with the best pickup line I could think of, and she surprisingly responded back. Long story short, we talked for about a good hour or so about our interests when she unexpectedly gives me her phone number so we could chat through there. We switch over to texting, and a few days later, I finally decide to ask her on a date. She didn't live too far from me, and driving wasn't a problem for either of us. Sophia, would you be interested in going to grab coffee with me? Being a guy who has gotten rejected by many girls, I expected the worst. But to my surprise, she actually accepted my offer and told me that she'd be more than happy to. We agreed on a date that worked out for both of us, and when that day finally came, I made sure I had my wallet, gas was in the car was clean, and the usual pre-date preparations. I drove to the local coffee shop about 5 minutes early, but I didn't see Sophia anywhere. Figuring she was running late, I sit down at a nearby bench when I receive a text message from Sophia letting me know that she was about to pull in. About 15 seconds go by, and a white SUV with very tinted windows pulls into the parking lot of the shop with its engine still running. I text Sophia if this was her car, and I got a response I wasn't expecting. "Come over to the car. I want to show you something before we go in." Normally, I would be completely oblivious to situations like this, but alarms started going off in my head, and something in my gut told me that something wasn't right. Not trying to make the situation more awkward than it already was, I got up and started slowly making my way over toward the car. As I approach the front side door, the window lowers a tad and a voice starts speaking. Based on the pitch and tone, I could tell it was a woman, but it was much too old to be Sophia. It was at this point when I happened to look in the back seat of the car. It was a little hard to see, but I could make out the silhouettes of 2 men sitting down wearing ski masks. Once I noticed this, I told whoever was in the driver's seat that I had to go because of a family emergency. It was obviously a lie, but I got in my car and sped out of there so fast that my blood was running cold. When I got home, I looked at my phone and saw about 20 plus messages from Sophia. Everything from "what happened, where'd you go" to "I'll hunt your ass down." I didn't respond to any of it and just stayed at a friend's house for the rest of the day, fearing that they would somehow track me down and do God knows what to me. I blocked the number and I didn't hear from Sophia again. What I do know is that I wasn't speaking to the person they claimed to be, and there definitely was no Sophia. This happened in my early 20s, around late March of 2017. I was a sophomore in college, and I was definitely no popular kid. The people who I considered as my friends were the type of people who most would refer to as the wrong people. Those who I did talk to, I spoke with very briefly about school-related stuff like upcoming assignments. I'd like to mention that I have autism, and it was often very difficult to interact with new people, which was a major factor as to why I didn't have many friends. As time progressed, I decided that I needed to find someone who I could be with and not hang out with some edgy teens who didn't give a care in the world. I signed up for Tinder, created my account, and chose a few photos that I thought would catch attention of others. Long story short, I started swiping left on people and swiped right on a few that I would hope would right swipe me back. For the first week, it was ridiculously boring. I got no likes, no responses from my private messages, and began to think that it was all a sham. A few days go by, and to my surprise, I had finally got a match with someone. I immediately opened it and saw that it matched with a really cute girl who was just a little older than me, and while she wasn't a 10 out of 10, she wasn't ugly. We both shared similar interests together, and her personality seemed priceless. Her name was Kate, and we hit it off well. I explained about how I was on the spectrum, but thankfully she didn't seem to mind or care. We would text for hours back and forth and would even talk over the phone once in a while if we had nothing going on. One day, Kate had asked me something I really wasn't expecting to hear, especially coming from a girl. She had told me if I wanted to come by her place and watch a movie together as her parents wouldn't be home. I told her that I'd be glad to, and I was honestly extremely excited that I actually had met someone who I could interact with. When the time finally came, I got into my car and plugged in the given address into my GPS, and surprisingly enough, it wasn't too far from my house. I started the drive all the way to the house, and in about 10 minutes my GPS led me to a big white house at the end of the street. Almost immediately, I noticed 2 red flags upon pulling up. All the lights had been turned off, and there were no other cars in the driveway, even though she claimed she had a car. However, I didn't come here for nothing, and I stepped out of my car and texted Kate, letting her know that I was here. Within seconds, she texted back telling me to go in through the back door and that she'll meet me there. I don't even remember thinking twice about it, but I reminded myself that this was my chance to meet someone who I could have in my life. I opened the gate that led into the backyard. The grass was knee height and there was broken glass everywhere. I made my way over to the back patio, where I saw a table with 4 chairs surrounding it, as well as an old shed in the back. That's when I noticed that there was something sitting in one of the chairs facing away from me. However, It was too dark to see just what this thing was. I take about 3 steps forward, and something in me told me not to go any further, and that I should just get out of here. I text Kate that I wasn't comfortable with this, and that's when I see a light from a phone screen inside the house light up, and then immediately shut off. I got no response, and I then speed walked over to my car and started it up and drove out of there, not wanting to think about whatever that was. As I was about halfway home, my car started making these constant weird screeching noises. When I got out of my car to take a look, I then saw what was wrong. All 4 tires of my car had been slashed, which meant that someone had done this while I was in the backyard. I thankfully still made it home safely, but I called police to report the incident. Turns out that house had been vacant for 3 years, and nobody was supposed to be living there. They unfortunately never found the people who damaged my car, and I had to go get my tires replaced the next day. I still think about this incident most days when going online, and I still don't know who or what was sitting in that yard chair. Alright, so this happened to me when I was 24 years old when I was living in New York at the time. I had been working at a convention center outside of Manhattan, and we'd oftentimes have to get there at pretty early hours to help the union laborers set up for whatever is being held. Whether it was a business convention, an entertainment setup, we'd always have to get everything ready no matter what. I'd also like to point out that I was using a dating app that I believe went by the name of OkCupid ever since I had broken up with a 2-year toxic relationship with my ex-boyfriend. One day, I was at work filling out some paperwork in my office as usual when I get a notification on my phone from the app. Some guy that went by the name of Dylan had messaged me asking what I was up to. His avatar had one of those anonymous photos, so I kindly rejected him, telling him that I couldn't talk now as I was at work. Not even a minute later, I get yet another notification, and this time he sends me a photo of something. It took me about a good second to realize that it was me working in my office. Let me point out that there were at least 100 people, if not more, in the convention area, and my office is right in front of it with a big window. I was skeptical at first and figured that it was possibly one of my coworkers playing their idea of a joke. I immediately blocked the account and temporarily disabled my OkCupid account and even closed the blinds. As soon as I got out of work, the first day of the event was over, and I received an iMessage from an unknown number. When I opened the message, I saw a photo of myself on the couch taken through a window. I felt my entire world start to die as I saw what I was looking at, and I of course blocked the number and went straight to the police. However, for whatever reason, they couldn't trace it as to where it led to or who it belonged to, which I call BS, but whatever. I haven't received any messages since then, and I never heard from Dylan again.